Welcome to the Wellness Quacks. I have a special guest today. Super pumped. It's Marquise.
Hey.
Yeah. We have a great topic, fresh, hot off the press today. It is. You guys are good. This is a great topic, especially with the intro that we do. This is from Politico. It's unbelievable. Anxiety and depression is spiking among young people.
No.
And no one knows why.
Wow.
Now, this was written by Daniel Payne. It's April 10th. It is pretty fresh. And then they do a circular argument. You know what a circular argument is?
No.
It's where you do your own research and then you feed into your research and cite your research to talk about your research to say this is why. And then so you just keep feeding off the same thing.
It's narcissism.
That's exactly what it is. So this one is by Daniel Payne and Aaron Smith, and they reference it. And that article is, What's Driving the Youth Mental Health Crisis? We asked 1,400 clinicians.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Fantastic. The other thing that is referenced in this, which I highly recommend you look it up, is it's a youth risk behavior survey that they do. We're not going to go through a lot of it, but I'll just reference the main topics, and we'll talk about that. Let's start.
Let's do it.
Marquise, without even reading this article, well, first of all, this has been in the news, so I think a lot of people have heard about it, especially since COVID. Mm-hmm. There's been a huge spike in anxiety, depression, and suicide, especially in adolescence and teenage years. Mm-hmm. It's actually really sad. From the bottom of my heart, there was I'll see if I can find it and post it on here, but there was a girl who took a picture of herself like every day during COVID on her laptop, and you could see her get depressed and her whole attitude change. It was heartbreaking.
Wow.
And by the end of the school year, she actually had and was being treated for suicide and depression.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's like heart-wrenching. Without even reading this, I can't wait to get into it. Marquise, why do you think that people are, especially adolescent, are suffering from depression and anxiety?
Well, I mean, you look at what they're eating, number one. Like I can tell a difference in my kids on what they eat and how they are, what they're putting into their body, how they're fueling their body. Sunlight, so how much you're spending time outside. Vitamin D is obviously linked to increasing your, I think it's serotonin.
And dopamine.
And dopamine. Being active, usually that goes hand in hand with sunlight. So typically you're outside playing and doing things like that. And if you're outside playing, you're with friends.
Yeah.
And so the true social interaction is definitely missing. And then a lot of screen time.
Yeah.
But that's
literally everything I was going to talk about today.
Oh, well, sorry.
No, that's fantastic because it's like that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to give your age, but I believe you were born around the same time as me, and I'm late 30s. So.
That would be safe to say. Yeah.
When we were kids, I don't know if this happened to you because I'm a boy. I hung around with boys my age, right? But when I was maybe 11 or 12, I got a bike when I was younger, but especially when I was 11 or 12, my bicycle gave me freedom. Mm-hmm. Like that was like my car until I was old enough to be able to drive.
Your wings, actually.
Yeah, and I looked it up around the town that I lived. It would not be uncommon for me to bike like 6 to 8 miles a day going around to my buddies' houses and doing stuff.
Yeah.
And now, like, I tell my kids, I'm like, hey, let's go on a bike ride. And it's like 4 miles. They're like, 4 miles? I'm like, that was like a daily thing for me to be able to interact with my friends.
Yeah.
And we didn't have phones. Mm-hmm. We didn't have internet. But I do remember, this will also age me as far as the technological advances in my life. Do you remember AIM? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. AOL Instant Messenger?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
When that came out, you want to talk about like instantaneous addiction?
Yeah.
I remember
ping.
Yeah. You're on your phone, or you're in your room, or you'd hear a ping on the computer and you get on there and you like alt tab, right? You have like 5 different chats going on.
Yeah, yeah.
My mom would be like, get off that thing.
Yeah. I didn't have as much access to that. My parents were much more strict and, but I'm not really sad that I missed that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty worthless.
Yeah. But that started the whole like thing of
but I would say that was like stage one.
well, yeah, that's your introduction into virtual friends, so to speak. Like people could be completely faceless, nameless, whoever they wanted to be.
Yeah. Because you see this online too. Like one of the things they talk about in this article is online bullying and how that's made a difference. I have very distinct feelings when it comes to bullying and looking at the history of it. When I was in, I think it was junior high, they introduced the zero tolerance policy.
Yep.
I personally hate that, and I think that completely destroys a youth and a kid's ability to learn how to stand up for themselves.
This is not going to be a popular opinion, but I agree.
It's not a popular opinion. I got in an argument with a principal over this.
Yeah. So it's interesting, though, because both of my kids have both experienced bullying. And
I even hate the term.
I do, too. But it's like everything else, right? You have to have trigger terms and
Sure,
all these things.
Yeah.
You just have to, obviously. But like it was really interesting to watch other people in their school and the different kids and how they were responding. And then like my kids thought like when somebody else was getting bullied that was their responsibility to go in and like fix the situation, which it opened up a lot of discussions because we were able to talk about, okay, what is your like sort of your lane, so to speak. Like I think as a society, we do a lot of the just standing back and watching, when things are happening to people and stuff like that. And we don't like engage when we should. Yeah.
Or interrupt when you should.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it also is the opposite extreme where you have people who think that everything is their problem and everything is their situation to solve. And sometimes that person needs to solve it on their own.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what do you learn?
Yeah.
Or how do you learn how to stand up for yourself or to advocate for yourself?
Yeah.
Right. And so
you expect other people to always step in. And that's in my opinion, and what I've seen in my lifetime, like, yes, okay, I don't have a research article, but I do have a lifetime of experience so far. And I've seen it from before to how extreme it is now. And now when you expect everyone to be there to take care of you all the time, it's not good. And it's not healthy, and it doesn't develop a kid to take a stand and to take action when they need to take action for themselves.
Right. Well, and then a lot of the counselors and things like that would get involved, right? And so they're trying to say what they're going to do and how they're going to help the situation. And it ended up just exasperating it. That's the word.
Exacerbating it.
That one.
Yeah,
that
I
word.
got you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Anyways.
That's a dangerous word. I don't always say that word because sometimes I'm like,
yeah, I got
what did you say? Making it worse.
Yeah, good job. Let's say it. But like my whole situation when the counselors would call me is I would say, I want them to handle it.
Yeah.
I want them to go and talk to the student. I want them to go and talk to the teacher if that's who it's with. I want them to handle it. I'm not going to show up. Like if I need to show up because there's like a situation where, now mom's got to get involved, you won't really like that situation.
Yeah.
And so I want you to know that you are capable of standing up for yourself and of finding a solution, whatever that looks like. If that means just like distancing yourself or like, doing other things or maybe finding out what that person's story is. Because sometimes that is the case, right?
Yeah.
Like as whatever it sounds like, fluffy is what I would call it. Sometimes there is a situation where like a lot of times people are intimidated by you or they're, whatever, and that's why they're targeting you.
Yeah.
Well, find out why. Like maybe have a relationship with that person or like not even like a friendship necessarily, but just find out what your commonality is. Yeah. And a lot of times you can dissipate it that way. So
I have found confronting things in my life makes the other person back down most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, hey, why are you being a jerk? Like, I don't understand. I'm not being a jerk. Okay, well, this is what you did. Help me understand why you did that. What do you want to call it? Whatever you call it is what I'll call it. Why are you doing that? I do that with my kids all the time. It's like my poor kids, like I out them all the time. It's like Eleanor will be in a sassy, frass, sour attitude. I'm like, why you got a sour attitude? I don't have a sour attitude.
Yeah.
What do you call it? I'm down. Okay, fine. Down. That's what we'll call it. Why are you down?
Yeah.
I don't know, Dad. I have a personal experience with this. When I think I was in seventh grade, maybe his 8th grade. This boy came in. He was being very vulgar. They had just introduced the idea of zero tolerance. And I was deathly afraid of getting a police write-up. In my home, that's like not okay. Getting in trouble with the law. Like, I've never been arrested. Yeah. I've done some things where maybe I should have been, but I've always been able to talk out of it. Well, let's just talk about this, officer. I thought that you could play paintball wherever you wanted to. Yeah. They introduced the idea. I was terrified of getting a police write-up. This boy walks into the locker room, starts swearing like crazy, like very inappropriate. It's a boys' locker room, like whatever. I didn't care, but I had a buddy that it really bothered him, and so he says, "Oh, you're real cool." So the kid thinks it's me, and he says, "What'd you say, Dylan?" I said, "It wasn't me. I don't care, man. I play sports. Like, I miss a shot, and Right. He said, "If you say it again, I'm going to beat you up." And in my mind, immediately, I was like, I don't want a police write-up. And if I fight back, I'm going to get a write-up.
Right.
And I'm a juvenile, so you don't think things through well anyway. Of course, he continued the behavior. My buddy said something again, and then he came back, and for 5 minutes, well, it wasn't 5 minutes. It's probably only about 2 minutes, but he nonstop pummeled me, just pounded me. And I sat there and just took it because I was terrified.
Right.
Well, then I had this incredible feeling. I went home and I cried my eyes out.
Yeah.
And it's not because I lost a fight. It's because I felt like a coward. I felt ashamed.
Right.
And I had no one who came to my aid, and people just watched me. And then there was rumors after that about that I was a coward. And I'm like, I'm not a coward. I don't want a police write-up, and I don't have any good options here. And it's the same idea. Like, I don't want to get into, like, gun stuff, but if you don't defend yourself, like, you think a police officer is going to show up? Like, what's the average response time?
Right.
It ain't going to happen. You have to learn how to stick up for yourself.
Right. Well, but that was the same time where even if you were the one being hit, you were still treated as if you were part of the fight.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And so, like, at that, if they didn't really go into those details necessarily, like, with school at first.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I knew that at that time, I'm like, well, if I'm going anyways.
Yeah.
But at the time, they were just like, you just didn't even want to, like, stand up for yourself because you were going to get in trouble. And I was the same way. Like, you definitely didn't want to get in trouble in my house.
No.
So it was, I think a lot of the things have good seeming intentions behind it.
Good thoughts, but terrible execution. The execution of it is not good.
Yeah. Well, and that takes us sort of back to that whole, situation like we were talking about earlier with the suicide stuff.
Yeah.
It's like that's all they talk about at schools.
So let me go into this, though, because I want to talk about that, what they focus on and what they talk about, because that's the other thing that's, in my opinion, is driving this problem that we're seeing with the kids. What they reference in this article is youth risk behavior. It's a youth risk behavior survey that they did. This is done by the CDC. Risky behaviors, they're trying to correlate that with depression and anxiety. And so because some of these trends that they're looking at are actually going down. I look at the information, I interpret it a little bit differently.
No.
Yeah, I do. So let's go over the topics that they focus on. And what they focus on is that these are the risky behaviors that typically, that they, in their mind, think should cause or create anxiety and depression. So here's the topics. And they have data, I think, all the way back to 2011. So yellows are there's no change. Reds is it's changing in the wrong direction. And then greens are this is the direction we want it to go in. So, for example, one of them is, let's just go to the topics. The topics are sexual behavior. The next one is substance abuse. And then the other one is experiencing violence. And then mental health and suicidality. Suicidality progress. So they focus on those topics, and then they ask a bunch of questions. So, for example, for experiencing violence, here are the main topics that they're looking at and interviewing kids and asking about. So these are the topics, for example. Were threatened or injured with a weapon at school, did not go to school because of safety concerns, were electronically bullied, were bullied at school, were forced to have sex, which I think that should go under the sexual one, experienced sexual violence by anyone. Experiencing sexual violence, that one's actually gone up in this example.
Mm-hmm.
And did not go to school because of safety concerns. That one has also been trending up since 2011. All the other ones are yellows or greens. So this goes back to what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why I wanted you on, I like the way that you are thinking through this. It's a different way to look at it. And what you said is that at school, that's what they focus on.
Yeah, 100%. My kids are constantly being told, like, so they have the Safe to Tell program, which in theory is like, it has its merits.
The idea behind it sounds good.
Right. Like that it has some situations that it's not a bad idea to have. But I think it's also been used inappropriately by a lot of people. But as far as like them hearing about if they have anxiety or if they're feeling anxious or if they're having depression and suicidal thoughts, and like it's literally a weekly topic that is brought up in their school by the people who are there to guide them.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have these teachers and counselors and things like that who are doing the best that they can. Right.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to do what they're supposed to do in the school based off of what, all the different things.
Yeah.
And so they have to be politically correct
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of this stuff. And, a lot of them, you can see the frustration in how they have to respond to the student and what they have to say. But my kids have never talked about or even thought about anxiety, depression, and suicide as much as they have since they've been in public school.
Yeah.
And we homeschooled for forever.
It's like that old adage, like what you think
on.
about and focus on
Mm-hmm.
grows.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was brought up when we were kids.
Barely. I don't even know that I even really thought about suicide. But I was in a really small town.
Yeah, and suicide, to be fair too, suicide when we were growing up, I mean it was there, but it's not nearly as prevalent as it is now.
Well, it may be, but I also feel like I think we have a hard time distinguishing on what the actuality was of that time versus now, because we have all the technology and social media.
The
and
advancements
like
of the again, this is what I want to go to, because they say they don't know why, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't know why?
Yeah.
Look at 25 years ago and look at now. What's
Right.
different between what we're doing? Because if you go back, particularly about 25 years ago, and you go from that point prior,
Yeah.
society is relatively the same.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we have telephones. Cell phones were around, but they weren't like they are now. I mean, like,
There are many computers now.
texting was like
Yeah.
AAA, or like 1111,
Exactly.
Like I remember I could text and drive.
Just by knowing.
Just by knowing, like the 5 key always had a dot on it, so I was like, right? Like I could text with my phone down, way down low.
But that even talks about where it talked about people don't feel safe to go to school, right? Well, if you have the media always saying like the school shootings and different things like that, and you have these police officers and security guards and metal detectors and all this kind of stuff to keep people safe, and you're doing these drills now.
Yeah.
So they're doing these drills where they're like active shooter drills, right?
Which again, like we never had that.
No.
And I was around when Columbine was around.
Yeah.
But we still didn't do anything like that. And so the thought process of even doing that, there were some wackos. We still had wackos, but it wasn't an idea that was planted in you. What's that movie where a dream within a dream?
Yeah, I can't remember the name either. But I mean, if anything though, have your teachers and things like that have that type of training, right? Like I don't know that, especially when they're starting it I think they're starting it in kindergarten and first grade and stuff like that.
They're starting it in grade school.
Yeah, and so it's like now you're growing up with that. Every time you go to school, you're in that mode. You're thinking about that, right? And so it was the same. I got terrified as a kid of a fire in my house because they kept talking about fire safety and stop, drop, and roll. And
my parents were terrified because I lit things on fire inside the house.
But I remember my parents trying to be all in the good parents and invested in that, and literally doing a smoke detector test when we're sleeping to see what we would do.
Yeah.
Terrified me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was okay, is that how much is a good thing? How much is a bad thing?
Yeah, it's not all bad either, right? Because then
preparedness
you're
is okay.
Yeah, you're prepared. You know how to act when it
but
happens.
I don't think it
instead
needs
of
to be
freezing.
all the time.
Right. And this goes again, where your attention goes, it grows.
Yeah.
So what do they not talk about? And what they don't talk about is you need to get outside.
Yeah.
Like sunlight is good for you.
What?
Yeah. Like there's a reason why the Pacific Northwest has higher suicidal rates too, but depressive rates.
Yeah.
And they lack certain things that allow their body to be able to function.
When I lived in Washington State, it was a big thing. Like we would have to literally have either lights or something like that where you're focused on having that, sunlight.
Yeah.
Because it was a thing.
Or another thing is physical human interaction.
Yeah.
There's a new trend. I don't have the numbers for it, but there's a new trend with 16-year-olds not getting their license. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know about you. Mm-hmm. When I was 16, it was like, I got to get my license. I got to get it now. I got to get it now. Because that was the mechanism by which, and before
freedom.
Yeah, it's the same idea. Like, okay, we have cars now, but before it was horses. Mm-hmm. And if you had a horse, you could go meet with your buddies and you could go do stuff. You go back before that, like the communities were smaller, so you could interact.
Yeah.
But now that's gone and it's reducing. Like, this is hilarious to me. Like, we don't know why. Really?
But I even would like to interject a thought in it, though, because like our generation is the generation of like the kids now. Like, we're the parents of that generation.
Yeah.
And I think because of the way that we got sort of indoctrinated into technology, like we were the before and the after, type of thing. Depending on how you were able to manage that and, handle it is how you ended up raising your children.
Yeah.
And so I think a big part of this is that the scare tactics worked for the parents for the most part. And so then that's being taught to these kids. And so the parents are telling them, be scared type of thing when you go to school, because they were the ones that saw the media coverage of the school shootings and things like that. And they're also the ones that are seeing the social media posts and all that, because some of the kids maybe aren't still, but the parents are. And so then that's being talked about too. And so but then with the whole thing about like the license, right? So my parents didn't let me get my license until I was like 18.
Really? My parents couldn't wait.
Yeah.
They were like, you need to drive.
That's all that I wanted. I just wanted to be able to leave. Like I couldn't wait to leave. But I think a big part of it is we're not doing our due diligence as parents in making sure that our kids are becoming more independent as they get older, right? So we keep this really tight grasp on them because we think that we're protecting them. Yeah. But in essence, we're not. We're actually hindering them and we're clipping their wings type of situation. And so I feel like it sort of feeds into that too, because it adds that extra layer of anxiety to the kid because their parents don't feel.
It's interesting you say that. When my wife and I were first married, she was a helicopter mom, and I didn't want to be. My grandfather was born in 1909. My dad was an afterthought. So my values are very in line with like baby boomers. So
mine too.
Corporal punishment was a thing.
Yeah.
I live across the street from a park, and I'll let my kids just go out there by themselves, and you wouldn't believe how often parents have come and like walked my kids back to my house, or sometimes what I'll do is run around the park. 3 laps is a mile. So I'll just let my kids go. And like my youngest is 2. I'll let her go by herself. I'll let them play and I'll run around the park. And I had a lady stop me one time. She goes, "Do you know whose kids those are?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And she goes, "Can you believe their parents?" And she just started blasting me, but she didn't know it was me. And I was like, "Yeah, like, what else should that parent do?" Mm-hmm. And she went off and correcting me without knowing that it was me. Yeah. And then I was like, all right. So I was like, "Evelyn, we should go inside now." And she goes, "What? You're their dad?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Why didn't you say so?" I did. You asked and I answered. But that's the idea, right? Like everyone is so terrified and so afraid of everything. Mm-hmm. My parents literally were like, "You need to go outside." Yeah. And I don't want to see you until it's like dark. Mm-hmm. And there was like an understanding of risk. I'm with you. What it sounds like you're saying is the kids are suffering, but the responsibility really comes back onto the parents and onto the community leadership to provide what they need in order to develop healthily and not just keep feeding in.
Well, this is going to go into a whole, I'll make sure I don't go any further, but
that's okay.
The whole, like, it goes back to the parents.
Yeah.
End of story. because like I think we as parents keep giving away our rights. We keep giving away our voice. We keep giving away our ability to be parents. And I like had this conversation with my kids literally 2 weeks ago. And I was like, there are not many things in this world that I will die for, but I will die defending my right to be your parent, and I will not roll over for that.
Yeah.
And I think as society keeps going in the direction that it's going, if the parents keep rolling over, and we're going to keep seeing our children and our children's children paying for our cowardness.
Yeah.
And so I refuse to be part of that group.
But that takes internal strength, right? Because we really were trained to let someone else take care of it.
100%.
I mean, like that's where
then.
the idea started.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that someone else is going to come to your rescue.
Yeah.
It takes like mental fortitude. It takes emotional strength to be able to overcome that and to instill yourself. It's uncomfortable.
Oh, it's super uncomfortable. But even me choosing to homeschool my kids when I did was completely against the norm. I got so much backlash from family, from people who, you know, knew me best. I'm like, why would you not do this? And I am so thankful that I did. I'm not saying that that's the option or the best choice for everybody, because sometimes it doesn't work out, right?
Sure.
That's fine. And we had to put them in public school because different things had happened. But being able to tell my kids, like, no, like, you're not going to do that, and I don't care what the state says, you know, type of situation, is not a popular belief.
And I want to go back to it's also scary. Like standing up for yourself sometimes is scary.
Oh yeah.
When I had one of my children in the hospital, and they wanted to do some medical things. They thought that he was sick. They didn't run any tests to make they didn't run any cultures. They did nothing to verify whether that he was sick. They were going off of one number, and it was when he was born. It's a long story. I don't want to get into it, but they threatened to call CPS on me, and they threatened to have me arrested.
Yeah.
So I went to the Child Protective Services agency inside this particular hospital. Man, that walk down to her office was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Everything about it sucked, but I was like, no, man, at the end of the day, this is my kid.
Yeah.
You reminded me of another experience. We did have Child Protective Services called on us for our first child. She was very skinny. And someone called to say that we were abusive parents and that she had failure to thrive due to abuse and neglect. Totally unfounded. You know, we were absolved of everything, but it was very trying. I tell you that because I met this guy from South Africa where it's a little bit more like the Wild Wild West there.
Yeah.
And he goes, "What'd you do to her? Do you know who did it?" And I was like, "I do know who did it." And he goes, "What'd you do to her?" And I was like, "What do you mean, man? Like, the law protects her." And he's like, "Dylan, she threatened your family." And I was like trying to defend my actions of not doing anything. And he's like, "I don't know when America became so weak." And I mean that. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
He's like, "Buddy, they almost took your daughter away. Like, that's your blood.
Yeah.
And they almost took her away, and you are doing nothing?"
Yeah.
He's like, "You give me your address.
Yeah.
I'll go let her know." And I was like, "Well, what do you have in mind?" You know? And he's like, "You can wait for karma to come around, or you can be karma." And
I think that's a difficult place to sort of be at too, right?
Yeah.
Because like, you know, if you have some sort of spirituality, like a lot of times you want that to be true.
Yeah.
You know, so you want God to be your vindicator type of situation. And so I think there is that fine line to where you have to know what is your part to dole out justice in that sense, right? So sometimes it is part of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's
and what I've learned too is like evil doesn't care.
No.
Like when kids are being complete, like they don't care. And if you don't stand up, evil will keep progressing. It doesn't care about you, and it takes some ugly truths that I think as a civilization we're like, "Oh, well, don't do that."
Yeah.
Like, no, when the bully keeps pulling my daughter's hair and like they poured water in her seat when she went to sit down, then they
turn around and just waylay him.
Yeah, you turn around and you smack that girl in the face, and guess what she won't do again?
Yeah.
You know, or if you duke it out, it may be ugly and it's not pretty, but guess what won't happen again?
Yeah, but I mean, even like if you go, like, I'm going to reference it again, but like biblical times, right?
Yeah.
Like God was there with them going against to go and dole out justice. So like there's definitely a place for it. And I think as sometimes when you have more of that mindset, you become sort of a pacifist, or you can be, right?
You justify the cowardness with pacifism.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's time to like bring back sort of that lion, spirit, lion mentality in all these different aspects, because now it's not just affecting us, it's affecting our kids. And there's nothing that'll fire me up more than you going after my kids.
Yeah.
I will do crazy things to defend my children.
Yeah. Which I experienced during COVID.
Yeah, really.
I did. We went into Costco and they wanted to mask our kids, and they like almost tried doing it themselves. And I was like, we don't go to Costco anymore. I love Costco. Okay. Like their pizza's good. I like their hot dogs. It's cheap. When you've got 7 kids, like, get whatever you want on the menu, but I won't, because of the way they treated me and my kids. And after that, like, I got very close to becoming physical. My wife's like, we better leave. And I'm like, you're right. We better leave, because I'm going to go to jail.
Right.
But that's like totally gone. Back in the day, it would have been like, he had it coming.
Yeah.
And a person has it coming, you take care of business, and it's done. There's nothing, like, it doesn't keep escalating into more and more insanity.
Right.
And the more cowardice you become, it's almost like the more cowardice your actions become as well.
Well, and it seeps into the society like a disease, literally.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to like, if you have a disease that's at the root of your society, why are you surprised when you have these outcomes? Why are you surprised when this is what's happening?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I don't think I could have said it better. Which brings me to another idea of like, why, like, you don't know why they're getting more depressed. When I was a child, athletics were super important. And you had kids who were crappy, but they developed themselves, and you learn a lot of interaction through that. Sports and athletics are still being promoted by a select group. They are way more expensive. And so your middle class, it's getting harder and harder to be able to compete.
Yeah.
In your lower class, it's very hard.
Well, and you have recesses now to do just the off-the-cuff type sports, which was like my biggest thing. Like we would have huge kickball tournaments, like with everybody. We'd get it all together like at recess and, just for fun.
Yeah. And that doesn't happen as much anymore.
It doesn't happen, I would say, at all.
I went to a high school here in town, and I volunteered my time to do sports physicals. Normally, I only charge like $25, $30 for them. But I called to see if I could do it, and the principal was like, honestly, Dr. Clark, we would like to do that, but we're just trying to get these kids to be able to play sports. Could you volunteer your time? And I was there till 10:30 at night, because if I wasn't, these kids wouldn't have played. And that is insane to me, where a way is not provided to be able to help develop these kids.
Yeah.
So, like, imagine a kid who's got a wonderful outlet. Let's say he's got a bad home life, or let's say he doesn't have a social life. You've just taken away an avenue for him, and you wonder why the kid's suicidal or depressed or has anxiety.
Well, and so many people have like the great relationships with their coaches and things like that because they were able to push them when they didn't have the parental figure to do it. And so now you take away that as well. And so you just keep leaving these kids on their own and staying in their head. Like that's where they're living. Or whatever they're seeing.
The more a kid is involved with things, like if they're in band, their likelihood of having bad XYZ is less. If they're they play sports, it's less and less and less.
Well, but you're also applying yourself to something.
That's what I was getting to. Like the idea is like, no, it's fine. That's the whole point. Because then your kid is developed.
Yeah.
And they have to learn how to overcome it. I grew up with a massive athletic drive. My children don't have as big of an athletic drive to me. It's weird. I don't understand it. But what I will tell you is like my son wanted to quit baseball because he was struggling and kept striking out. He wanted to be a pitcher. He walked everyone until the walk rule was up. Came in my truck and he just like started sobbing and he's like, it was heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
I mean, like when your kid is just like, I suck. I'm the worst kid on the team. I'm no good. And he's like, I wish I wasn't here. And, what I wanted to do is rescue him, right?
Right.
Like
it's the hardest thing
like,
to not
it's
rescue
okay,
him.
buddy. And it's like, no, that feeling sucks.
Yeah.
And there's only one way to overcome this.
Yeah.
And the only way to overcome this is by getting better.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
So he made a plan. And the cool thing about my boy is I would come home from work and he's like, Dad, we have 30 minutes of daylight left. you promised you'd play catch.
That's great.
And so we'd go out there and we worked and worked and worked and worked. And like, I might get emotional.
Yeah.
It was the coolest thing in the world. It was like they made it to the end of the playoff tournament. It was in Little League. And we went up there and he's like, I'm going to hit tonight. Like, I know I'm going to hit tonight. I'm going to do it. So he went up and he hit a liner down third base. He made it to first base. And then they overthrew the guy and he got to second. And then they overthrew him. And the other team is pretty good. It's playoffs. Yeah. And they just made some silly errors. And then he made it to third. And the coach was like so pumped. Me and my wife were over there like, he hit, he did it. Like he overcame this huge fear. Like he was in there and he's like, I'm going to hit. And I always go back there. I'm like, you're good, buddy. And he's like, I got this. Yeah. And then he was on third and the coach is like, I'm not going to. Like he told me, he's like, we're not going to have him steal home. The next batter up is really good. He'll hit him in. We'll get him home. He's going to love it. Mm-hmm. And Josh stole home on his own.
Oh, my God. That's awesome.
He came in, and it was only like the second or third inning. Yeah. But the coach threw him up. The whole team was like behind him. Awesome. And me and my wife were over there like a baby. It was like, like he did it. Right? But like, when you take away that, because
he earned it,
because you think, oh, my child's not athletic, and let me tell you, like my kids aren't like me. Yeah. But when you see your kid like learn how to overcome something, there's a direct application for the rest of life. Yeah. You want to know why they are suffering? Yeah. Because you're not giving them the outlets. Our church used to do basketball tournaments, softball tournaments. We had Boy Scouts. All of that has been taken. Like we don't do that in our church anymore. Yeah. And to me, I'm like, why are we not doing this? Yeah. It's good for them.
But that's a core memory for him now. Yeah. Right? And so now he has the situation of where he wasn't good. He worked at it.
When he feels like that.
Yeah. Remember it.
Yeah.
And remember where you are now.
Because trust me, people, you will feel like that again.
Oh, 100%. But I was saying, like, my kids they did rock climbing. And, like, when they first started, their hands are bleeding. Their muscles are pumped. Like, they are, like, incredibly sore. And they wanted to stop. But now they're, like, they're amazing at it and they do fantastic, but it's all part of those like core like developing of your
you're character. Creating the fundamentals of who that person is and who they will become.
Yeah. And I think that we lose sight of character. Like let's go back to building and developing your character
and talk about that.
Yeah, 100%. And not just in like the little fluffy way where they give like these little like character you know things that it's like a participation award, but tell me something specific. Yeah. What exactly did they do? Yeah. You know, like let's celebrate that 100%. But just because you're trying to, you know, pass out things, you know, whatever. So,
no, because like losing's important too. 100%. Like learning how to lose is. I've been on losing teams, but
it makes you not want to lose.
That's right, and so then you fight hard.
You fight really hard.
Yeah, and you come back. I played hockey in college. Not like I wasn't like a. Let me rephrase. I wasn't on like I was on a. How do you say it? It was kind of like intramural, but we played other teams. Yeah. But we weren't like scholarshiped. But the school paid for all of our stuff. Okay. Okay. So I don't want to give this image like. And I was the worst person on our team. Yeah. For me, that was really hard. That year, I played with some guys who played in the juniors up in Canada. Mm-hmm. So really good hockey players. And some guys who from Michigan and Wisconsin. And that year at practices, they would work with me one-on-one, and they developed me. At the end of the year, I won the most improved player. Now, as a really good athlete in the other sports that I played a lot of rugby and soccer growing up, mm-hmm. and baseball. And I always looked at that award like, like you was. Yeah. I'll tell you what, man, that year, that was the most important award I've ever won. I've won MVPs before. That was the best thing in my life. Yeah. I was like, yeah, man, like I developed, you helped me, and we saw me go from here to here. That was awesome. It was amazing. It felt amazing. And when you don't have your kids involved in anything, they miss out on a fundamental principle that you have to understand and ingrain as a child. Yeah. You can do it as an adult, but I think it's way harder.
Well, so that it's funny though, because like I feel like even with this, but so this year I took up dancing, and so my entire childhood I was always told that I didn't have rhythm, that I couldn't dance, and that like that,
white girl,
yeah, pretty much, right? And so like I believed
I feel
it.
the same way about my vertical,
but I believed it,
yeah,
right? And so like I gave them that power to tell me what it, and so I started in January. And I found like this great group, and now it's like this whole core group that I have, and we go dancing all the time and everything. But what was cool was that in the group lessons that we have, the 2 instructors that are there. So because of my personality and the way that I am, you either love me or you hate me. Like, there's no middle ground, right?
I'm the same way. Yeah.
So
people are like, screw that guy. I'm like, what did I do? I just hate you. Fair enough.
Like your face, I just can't. And so, but like everybody else in the group, like they're dancing and everybody's doing fine or whatever. But I get picked on intentionally because they know, I want it. Like, tell me what I can do better.
Yeah.
Polish what I can do better. Like, make me better. Because I don't want to just be the same.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm here, if I'm putting in this effort, I don't want to just be okay.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to be as good as I can be, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I'll get it. And everybody else in the class is looking, and they're like, man, they're rough on you. And I'm like, yeah. It's great. It's fantastic.
And they're not mean.
No, they're not mean at all. But they don't do it to anybody else because nobody, like the other people, when they would do it to them, they don't come back.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so why are you here exactly? Are you just assuming that you're going to just be awesome at it because you tried it? Like, no, 100%. Like, I still am improving and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I will always. But that's why I like that sport, because it's like you can't just like arrive.
Yeah.
There's always something. But like having that I don't know, mental drive, I guess, to be like, you know what, screw all of you. Maybe I can't dance. Maybe I don't have natural rhythm, but I can do the best that I can, and I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to have fun at it. But a lot of the parents are just like, they start taking band lessons, and it annoys their ears because it's like squeaky or whatever, right? So they make it horrible for the kid. And they're like, it's awful to listen to and all this kind of stuff. Well, why would they want to keep doing it?
Yeah.
Like if you're just constantly.
That actually happened to me with the saxophone, my mother. So I made a conscious effort. My mom made us all play band instruments. And to be fair, I'm not going to only throw my mom under the bus on this because I didn't like practicing. But every time I tried, she's like, that's so annoying. And I'm like, sorry. So my daughter, she practices the piano and she'll play the same stanza or the same thing until she has it perfect. Like it's something in her head. It's the way she's wired. She'll play it and play it and play it. Yeah. And I'll be cooking in the kitchen and I'm like, I can't stand it. And my wife's like, well, she's practicing. I'm like, that's why I don't say anything because that is irresponsible of me.
Right.
So I'm going to shut up, but internally I'm like, play something else. Like,
exactly. It grates on you for sure.
Yeah.
But then that's as your character as a parent, right? So like it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It goes back to that. Like it's okay. Yeah. Be uncomfortable.
This is the last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll end the show today. We didn't read much of the article, but I do want to read this because I think this is the dangerous thing, is not understanding the effects, and this is a health and wellness show.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do this. I'll bring some of the major antidepressants that are used and talk about the effects of those and what it does. Because this is what they say in the article. This is a doctor that commented, said, there is no way we can treat our way out of this. This is Dr. Ashwin Vasan. A lot of things are being tried, and not a lot of it will pan out. Right? And to me, like that's the problem. We had because of what was happening, especially during and after COVID and the fallout of what they did to children, which I think was tragic. If that doesn't make your blood boil, I'm surprised there really wasn't a revolution at that point. I really am.
I was hoping we were having one.
Yeah, because how they treated youth.
Yeah.
If my kid would have done self-harm because they were not able to be involved. Now, luckily, we took it as vacation time. Yeah. So we went camping a lot and we just did a lot of things. But there's a lot of parents who couldn't. Right. And if one of my kids did self-harm or ultimately like killed themselves, I don't know, man. Like I would have been looking for blood. Yeah. I was surprised that there wasn't a revolution with that. But at church around that time, they had a fireside I don't know what it would be in other religions, but basically like a special sermon talking about, hey, if you're depressed, if you have anxiety, it's okay to get on medications. And the whole solution to it was a medicative route.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, I'm going to be religious for a second, but like the entire point of Jesus Christ and following his gospel is how to find peace and joy in this life even when things suck. So let's try that first.
Yeah.
But secondly, let's go back to what we know works.
Yeah.
Why are we abandoning this and going to a medicative route where they say, hey, we can't medicate our way out of this?
Well, so I actually got on anti-anxiety medicine probably like almost 3 years ago. Because there was a period of my life where I just felt like I couldn't do it on my own type of situation, right? And so I thought that was my solution, because that's what everyone was telling me. And they're like, this is what you need to do. Well, if you look back at what was going on in my life, like I was more sedentary. I was not going outside. I was not interacting with people. I was very like solo. But I went on it for probably about a year and a half, something like that. And toward the end of that year and a half, I started realizing that I felt nothing.
Yeah.
And like I started,
That's why I want to go over the chemistry. It railroads your emotions.
Well, I went on, I realized it when I was watching a movie that would normally make me cry. And I felt nothing. And I sat there and I was like, I'm just a shell. Like I'm literally just a shell. And I think I feel like it's almost counterintuitive, but like there is a place for medication in my mind. I feel like sometimes there is that situation or you need just something to get you through that point or whatever.
I don't necessarily disagree with that.
But
I don't want to come across that way. Is what I'm trying to say.
No, I'm just saying because like I think that it is helpful for a lot of people, right? But I don't think it cures the issue. Yeah. So I think that if you do it in conjunction with trying to figure out more things or trying to get yourself more healthy or whatever it is.
And a goal to get off of it.
Yeah, like your goal is to not be on it for forever, right? Because it's not solving the solution, it's masking the problem. Yeah. So what is the problem? And figure that out. And so once I was able to see that and like, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to like fix whatever's going on in my thought process, in what I'm doing in my life and things like that? And I weaned myself off of it. And it's like, it was crazy because at first it was like this influx of like all these emotions again. And I'm like, wow, I'm like always crying and always like whatever. And so like, but it was hard. Like it was really hard.
She's laughing and crying. I'm not sure what to do right now.
But then I went like really low too, and everything like that. Like I got really bummed out because it does give you like a little pick me up too, right? But I was able to figure out this is why. This is what I was trying to like suppress my entire life. And I think in those type of situations, you can actually use it to your benefit, but it is not, in my opinion, the end-all solution. Yeah. I think it needs to be in conjunction with somebody who's actually looking for your overall mental, physical, emotional well-being. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. Going along the mental fortitude, too, to me, depression's actually important. Mm-hmm. You're not always happy. Like the idea of like, you need to be happy, you need to be happy. No, you don't. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I have a lady that I talk to and work with. She's amazing. I totally love her. And what she makes me do is like, Dylan, when you're feeling that, I want you to explore it. What does it feel like? Yeah. Where does it feel? And then I have to like live in it. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you, as a small business owner, sometimes life sucks. Oh, right? Yeah. And you wake up sometimes with anxiety and you're like, I gotta make ends meet. Mm-hmm. I gotta make sure that this happens and this happens. And you'll wake up and you'll have a little bit of anxiety and not a little bit, like,
sometimes crippling. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be crippling. But what I've learned to do is like, this is an emotion that makes me, it feels like it freezes me, but it makes me like sit back and identify what is going on. Mm-hmm. And when you learn to get mental strength and emotional fortitude towards that thing, and you learn that those feelings are okay, and learn what devastation feels like.
Sit in it.
Yeah,
Like, just sit in. Like, one of the things I tell the kids all the time, I'm like, I understand what you're feeling. Just sit in it.
Yep.
Write down what you're feeling. Figure out what that process is. But I had to do it too. Like, this last year for me. So I've had to sit in a lot of different things and just be like, okay, why do I feel this way about this? Why am like, and figure out why, like, and look at the whole situation and be like, somebody was saying that anger was the body's response to your boundaries being crossed or your boundaries being,
I can see that.
Right? And so, like, we look at anger, and I don't know about you, but I was taught anger was bad.
Yeah, you shouldn't be angry.
Yeah. And so I was like, no, why would we have all of these emotions?
It's how you perform anger that it may be inappropriate. But no, like, that emotion's important. You should be angry.
100%.
When major boundaries are crossed, you should be angry.
Yeah.
It should motivate you to action so that you do something, right?
Yeah.
The last thing we didn't get to go over was diet and how diet has changed over the last 20
Everything's
years.
processed and white.
Processed, white, and full of crap.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very terrible environmental toxins that we are consuming and giving to our children. There's other countries where they have less suicide depression. Mm-hmm. Again, I just look at them like, what are they doing differently? And they have outlawed a lot of the things that are in our food.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe we should just mimic them a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know, call me crazy.
Well, I think a lot of people think that eating whole foods is more difficult than eating the processed stuff or going through the
It's
the
cheaper.
fast food. Well, it can be.
No, I mean, it's cheaper to get processed crap.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But, like, depending on how you do it, if you buy in bulk with, like, there's places where you can buy in bulk with a family and different families and actually do all that kind of stuff. Like,
The point is you have to be interested in it.
you have to, and it takes a little bit more effort.
Yeah. Quit being so lazy.
Well, I mean, it goes to everything.
Yeah.
So
no, it's true. Anything worthwhile takes effort.
100%.
Anything that has value to it doesn't come cheaply.
Nope.
Yeah.
It just depends on what you want to spend your money on. It's either gonna be doctor bills or food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd rather
eat good.
I'd rather eat good.
Yeah.
That's why we mainly only eat venison. Yeah, I think it's mainly venison and elk in our home, mainly. Yeah. And then I go fishing on the West Coast.
Nice.
But we didn't read a ton of the article, but the article basically talks how, like, we're hopeless and we're helpless.
Right.
And the idea that
we're going to remind you of it all the time.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Where your attention goes, it grows, and you got to focus on being a parent is difficult. I believe in corporal punishment. I have spanked my children in the past. I don't have to do it a lot. If you think it feels good to spank a child and it's enjoyable, like, you're dead wrong.
Yeah.
But my kids also know that there are boundaries that we are not allowed to cross in this home. And I always show them an increased amount of love when I'm done.
Yeah.
My kids know that they're loved and they're taken care of. The reason I bring that up to end the idea of today is that anything worthwhile takes effort.
Yeah.
It takes work and it takes sacrifice.
You can't be a passive parent.
No. And that's where I have a problem with medication, because what you're looking for a lot of times is an easy out.
Right.
It's like, well, try not to make an excuse in your life and try and look for a reason why you should do something else.
Yeah.
I'm not saying no one should be on medications.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is like this lady, like, what's the first thing? Well, we got to see if we can find medications for this.
Right.
Why don't we make that our completely last resort? When you're all in somewhere else, that will be your last resort.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Hope you enjoyed Marquise. I love having and being around her. She's just she's a joy to be around.
Yeah, well,
so any thoughts, questions, comments, go ahead, like and subscribe. If you want us to go over more of this, more than happy to do it.
Yeah.
If you want me to go, what I really want to do is go over this youth risk behavior survey, because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like, here's the truth too, man. My pothead friends growing up, they had a great sense of community. They really didn't suffer a lot with depression. I mean, they suffered with laziness, but whatever. Like, some of their risk things in here, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, whatever.
Well, the risk is when you lose connection.
Right.
So
that's the best. Yeah. That's probably the best. That's the best way to wrap up. Thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Have a great day, guys.
Bye.